You're listening to the best of the Martha Zoller Show. You can hear the show live Monday through Friday from 9 to 11 on AM 550 and FM 102.9 WDUN and streaming at accesswdun.com. You can find all things Martha Zoller at marthazoller.com. It is the Martha Zoller Show. It's always great to be here, and it's always great to be talking to Congressman Mike Collins. We've got him here today. Mike, how are you?
I'm doing fine. How you doing, Martha?
I'm doing great. Listen, a lot happened since we talked last week, and wanted to just talk to you first about the Laken Riley bill, because I know we got it passed in the House in a big bipartisan way. I know you spent a lot of time over in the Senate last week. Just update us about that.
Well, we did, and as I've always said, I'm just an old school type person. I like to go see my customer, or the person I'm trying to convince in this case, and that's the Senate. And so we've met personally with both Georgia senators. I thought they were good, productive meetings. Senator Warnock had a few questions that on the policy side, which I understand, and that's just doing your job. And so we're going to get back with him with those answers, and he as well as Ossoff, and because we'd love to have our Georgia senators behind us on this. This is their constituent as well. Martha, we're not stopping there. We're lining up meetings with as many senators as we can.
Well, and I tell you too, what the last count I saw was that all the Republicans are in favor of it, but they needed 2 Democrats to make it work. Well, that's our 2 Georgia senators. So what's your thoughts about whether they are going to cross over and vote for your bill, or are they going to try to create their own bill?
Well, and I hope that we don't go down that line of trying to create your own bill. I mean, this is a good, solid, common sense bill that's already passed the House. We're not trying to do political work here. We're just trying to do good policy. And there is a difference in that. And this right now, this young lady has become the symbol of what the crisis is in this country. And we don't need to get into the political war on this. We just need to give our law enforcement the tools that they can use to try to make sure that this never happens again. Because if this would have been law, Ibarra would have been picked up and detained when he got pulled over for shoplifting, and he would have been deported. And so, we can have the larger issue, the larger battles on immigration. We've got a narrow majority in the Senate, and we've got a narrow majority in the House. The House has passed an immigration bill. It's in the Senate. And I know we're at loggerheads over that. But this is something that's not, and it's proved it's not, because it went through the House so fast, we didn't really have a chance to whip that bill. And you saw 37 Democrats just join on in less than 1 week and help us get this thing across the finish line with just fantastic bipartisanship.
Well, we're going to keep putting pressure on there. And I got to tell you, as far as the immigration bill, H.R. 2 that was passed last year, what I've been pushing our senators to do is what they used to do in the Senate, that if they really do believe that their bill, their so-called compromise bill, is a better way to go, then take up H.R. 2, add the compromise as an amendment, pass it, and then go to conference committee. And let's have a real discussion instead of this politics that they're playing with what they like to call comprehensive immigration reform.
You hit the nail on the head. I mean, it's that simple. And that's what we've been saying as well, take it up, vote it down, amend it however you want, and then send it back. And then at least that starts a real conversation behind closed doors where you can really iron this thing out. But in the case of Laken Riley Act, you really don't have to do that. It's just that simple. And, we're always trying to help protect the motoring public out there by trying to give law enforcement the tools they need, and that's as simple as this bill can explain to people. And the other good thing it gives is it puts a little teeth in it from the state side, to where if the federal government doesn't want to do that, then you can take the federal government to federal court and get injunctive relief where a judge will tell them to go do their job.
Well, we're going to keep pushing, and I appreciate you doing the work on this. Let's move on to the budget. The so-called minibus was passed. I'm not surprised it ended up the way it did. It was a big bipartisan vote, but a lot of Republicans voted against it, as well as a number of Democrats voted against it. You were one of the people that voted against it. So tell us what the problems are with this bill, and where does it get us? That's the bigger question.
There's a lot of money spending in this thing that got added at the last minute from the other chamber. There's a lot of social things in it that I don't believe in, with the LGBTQ stuff that were pushed back into this thing. But at the end of the day, Martha, I am not. I campaigned on this. I'm not for an omnibus, a minibus, electric bus, any bus. It's appropriations. We don't have that hard of a job description in that town out there. And we've got to get back to appropriating these federal agencies. And when we do that, we'll be able to bring a lot of this stuff under control, and a lot of these problems that we've been seeing throughout the country with overspending and just overreach. But, you knew it was going to pass because, it was majority of it was Nancy Pelosi's budget. What we're doing is basically continuing that with some addition.
I mean, to that point, Kevin McCarthy actually was able to negotiate a budget. I didn't like it, but it was better than the one we ended up with. But they vacated him, and I know you did not. You were not in support of that.
No.
There's, so we're really in a worse position than we were. I'm not blaming Mike Johnson for that, though. I think it's because of the time we took and the way we acted for several weeks. It really hurt us. So where are we now regarding Speaker Johnson? And did Kevin McCarthy actually negotiate a better deal than what we ended up with?
I would say yes, that we didn't get the best deal that we had to begin with. Because you're exactly right. We vacated the chair at a bad time. And we had been passing some appropriation bills. And then we spent, the better part of a month trying to get a new speaker. And all that does is just add, you may say it's 4 weeks, but in federal government time, you might as well say it's a year. It just added time. And you knew that Mike Johnson came in. He came behind the 8 ball. He didn't have a good shot. He didn't have a play. I know that. But that's done now. That no matter how you say it, slice it, it's over. We have a 1-seat majority. And you better believe that if we walk in that chamber any day and we don't have the majority of Republicans sitting in there, you're going to get a vacate the chair, because they can all call it up, and anybody can, and you're going to get a new speaker. So we need to be careful about that, and we all need to be making sure that we stay, we're in D.C., but we're in 2025 now, and I'm expecting a budget. I need that budget out now, and we need to start working on appropriation bills. We need that budget so that we can get a top-line number to what the appropriators work towards. And we need to start working towards those numbers. We need to start kicking these appropriation bills out and over to the Senate. And then that way they cannot jam us and say that we're not doing our job since we're supposed to start appropriations.
Yeah, so has any work been done on the 2025 budget?
Yes, that budget is put together right now. We need to drop it.
Good.
It needs to be brought up.
Yeah, because you're not too far behind the 8 ball at this point in time, because when we used to follow the rules, you had a budget by April 15th. You had a framework for a budget by April 15th. You moved on from there to get the appropriations bills, and then you would get it passed, hopefully, before you went into August recess, so that you could come back and get it going. Because I tell you, my son works for USDA, and he's in the animal research side of it, in the poultry side. He says, we can't start an animal research project if we have 2 months of funding at a time, because you can't handle the animals for a period of time if your money might run out in 2 months. So
That's right.
There's a lot of things in the federal government that they're just sitting on their thumbs, not working. So we've got an inefficient federal government anyway. Okay? Then we do this 3 months at a time, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, whatever it is, and we don't do our budget on time, and we make it more inefficient because there are areas of the government that can't function if they don't have an actual budget to deal with.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. They spend more time preparing for a shutdown than they do anything.
Yes.
So every time we do these short-term continuous resolutions or anything like that, you're right. The federal government spends all their time. Well, let's get ready to shut down and go home, and so we've got to finish doing our job. We've got to get on top of that. And I feel certain that the majority of the people in the Republican caucus, we're ready to roll with it. We just got to make sure that we do. We go ahead and get those numbers, Martha, the budget, and we stick to it. We don't change once we get going and decide, well, that's not what we want to do. These side deals, all of these behind, whatever these little extra deals were, Speaker Johnson has assured us that that's no longer the case. So everything should be out in the open, and we all should have the same numbers.
Mike Collins, I appreciate you being with us this morning, giving us this update, and we'll keep talking with you because we got to get the work done.
I appreciate your time.
It's where North Georgia comes to talk. It's the Martha Zoller Show on AM 550 and FM 102.9 WDUN.
Joining us right now is Representative Barry Loudermilk, who is who heads up the oversight panel investigating the now defunct House Select Committee on January 6th, and is also looking into interactions that Fulton County DA Fonnie Willis interact with the committee to look into January 6th. Representative Loudermilk, thank you so much for being with us today.
Hi, Martha. It's good to be with you. It's good to talk to you again.
Yeah, so we talked about this a few months ago, but I know a lot more has happened since then. How deep and wide is this really, I hate to use the word conspiracy, but this movement to only tell one side of the story of January 6th?
Well, the Select Committee is, in my opinion, in damage control right now because we, for a long time, most people suspected there was a political motive into what they were doing. But now that we're releasing the evidence of that, people are starting to see that the Select Committee didn't do what it was asked to do, but it tried to legislatively prosecute Donald Trump. And, they're literally trying to cover up their cover-up at this point. And they really don't have a leg to stand on. But even from the very onset, the legislation that was passed to create the Select Committee gave them specific directions of what they were supposed to do. The main task was to look at the security failure at the Capitol and make recommendations of changes that should be made so it'll never happen again. There was nothing in their final report about that, and we couldn't even find documents to indicate that they ever did any research in it. So what they did do is Liz Cheney effectively took control of the entire committee, even though she wasn't the chairman, and she directed them to point everything at Donald Trump to create a narrative that he was the one who planned the attack on January 6th. He was the catalyst behind it, and they even made up a lot of sensational stories from everything that he's throwing food in the West Wing of the White House to he attacks a Secret Service agent. And basically what we found out is all the evidence that did not support that narrative, most of it was kept out of the public eye, and even tried to keep it out of away from us to be able to expose it. But through the diligence of our team, and we're relentless. We're not going to stop until we get it all. We were able to obtain a lot of this evidence, and we're making it available to the public.
So, for example, there was that so-called bombshell testimony by Cassidy Hutchinson, who really was a lot of hearsay, when she was given the testimony. But there was direct testimony by someone who we never heard from. So was that a common theme, that you'd have a witness testify in a certain way, and that if there were witnesses that testified differently, you didn't hear from them.
That's exactly what happened, and it's interesting. I call Cassidy Hutchinson the REO Speedwagon witness. If you remember the song, I heard it from a friend who heard it from a friend who heard it from another.
Yes.
And that was her testimony, at least one of her testimonies. So one of the things we uncovered is Cassidy Hutchinson was called in for 3 testimonies in the beginning with her original attorney, which was representing a lot of the people from the Trump White House. He's from the Atlanta area. Everyone who knows this attorney, they refer to him as a Boy Scout. He is a by-the-book guy and a good attorney to represent you, and he's just going to do everything by the book. And so her first 3 testimonies pretty much aligned up with everyone else that was testifying. They weren't giving them any information that the Select Committee wanted. After her 3rd testimony, these are behind closed doors depositions, Ms. Hutchinson has a meeting with Liz Cheney without her attorney present, which is a violation of rules and law as well. When they finished that meeting, Cassidy Hutchinson fires her attorney, and Liz Cheney provides her with a new attorney. Then Liz Cheney calls her in for a private deposition, where the other depositions were with staff attorneys and her attorney and other members of the Select Committee. Liz Cheney scheduled this one without notifying any other member of the committee. They didn't hold it in the normal committee room. They had it in Liz Cheney's hideaway office in the Capitol, and it was only Liz Cheney, Cassidy Hutchinson, her attorney, a court reporter, and a videographer. And it was in this testimony where she started telling these sensational tales of President Trump screaming that he wanted magnetometers taken down, that he knew that the people there at the ellipse had weapons, and he wanted them there. They were his people, that he threw food. He attacked a Secret Service agent because they wouldn't drive him to the Capitol. That's when all of this all of a sudden comes out, which is in contrast to her first 3 testimonies. Liz Cheney then takes that videotape, calls a meeting of the entire committee, and plays the video of her testimony. They decide right then they have to have an emergency televised hearing. So within days, they have this hearing where they are parading Ms. Hutchinson before the entire country with these sensational stories, which they never corroborated with anyone else to that point. That right there tells you they got the story they wanted. They didn't want anybody else to contradict her story. But from that point on, we have been able to find different transcripts of different interviews that almost exclusively, she's the only one that comes up with these stories. We just released a transcript of a White House employee who was physically with Donald Trump that day, and this guy is apolitical, so he's not taking any sides. I mean, he talks about Trump being angry and using some foul language that day, but I mean, he's a New York construction guy, right? So yeah. I don't think that surprises anybody. But he explicitly denies that some of her testimony. But the interesting thing is there was a testimony by Tony Ornato, who was Deputy Chief of Staff for Operations. Basically, he oversaw all the Secret Service, all the presidential movements and all this. He was a former Secret Service agent himself. This has been known since they did their investigation as the missing Ornato testimony. We recovered it and found out in that testimony that Tony Ornato had testified before the committee that none of these things happened, and that Donald Trump did authorize the National Guard, he authorized 10,000 troops for the National Guard days before January 6th, which we knew to be fact. But again, this was a missing testimony. Then we found out that the Select Committee sent 4 transcribed interviews, their transcriptions, to the White House instead of keeping them. They are House documents. They belong to the House. They sent them to the White House, and they sent 8 to the Department of Homeland Security. The 8 at Homeland Security were the Secret Service agents that were with the president that day. The 4 White House documents were White House employees that were with either Donald Trump or Mike Pence that day. So we started a campaign, went to battle with both the White House and DHS to get these documents. And we've at least partially won both of those battles. We have had access to the White House transcribed interviews, both redacted and unredacted, and we're starting to make the redacted versions available. Most of the redactions are to protect the identities of, and they're mostly military personnel. But with Department of Homeland Security, they wouldn't even respond to us for a long time. We were finally able to get them to send some of the redacted transcribed interviews, and one of the ones they sent us was of the driver of the SUV that Donald Trump supposedly tried to take the steering wheel. Now, Martha, this is what's interesting. Cassidy Hutchinson made her public statements in June. They didn't even interview the Secret Service driver until September. When they interviewed him, they never did even ask him if that incident took place. He had to interject it on his own. This will tell you, they did not want to hear from him that it didn't happen because they had a predetermined narrative. So it's not just the missing documents, is that we start seeing this pattern of avoiding certain questions that they know would contradict Cassidy Hutchinson's hearsay testimony. So it's clear. I mean, and no one, even we've got mainstream media reluctantly saying, yeah, this doesn't look good. No, it doesn't look good because this is a congressional committee engaged in promoting a false narrative for political purposes under the guise of doing an investigative committee work. So,
Representative Loudermilk, I mean, appreciate you keeping the work going on this. We've got to get to the bottom of this. Yes, you're right. Mainstream media is reluctantly taking a look at this now. If people want to know more about what you're doing, how can they find out?
There's several different ways you can do it. If you just, Google or do a search on my name, you're going to find a lot of articles. If you go to my website at loudermilk.house.gov, you can find links there to our official page, but also more directly is if you go to the Committee on House Administration's website, you can just search that and click on our subcommittee. We have all the documents listed there, the transcribed interviews, and we send out regular breaking news of anything that we find out, such as the things we found out about Fonnie Willis we're starting to post out there as well.
Absolutely. Representative Barry Loudermilk, thank you so much for being a part of this fight, and we'll talk to you again soon.
All right, Martha. Thank you very much.
Putting the talk in news talk. It's the Martha Zoller Show on AM 550 and FM 102.9 WDUN.
Joining me right now is Representative Andrew Clyde. We wanted to get together with Andrew since a lot has happened in the last week since we talked, and wanted to get him to check in. Good morning, Andrew. How are you?
Good morning, Martha. It's always great to be with you on WDUN.
Thank you. So a lot has happened since we talked last week. The minibus or omnibus or fail the bus, I don't know what it is, passed since we talked the last time. And then we also had a little bit of drama around the speaker and the motion to vacate, but it looks like that's on hold. But a lot going on. And I guess the question is, one, about the omnibus, but two, are we actually making progress on next year's budget with regular order? Is there any light at the end of the tunnel, I guess is what I'm asking you.
Well, Martha, I think we are making progress on regular order. We actually passed 7 of the appropriations, and I think we did a really good job of that. The Republican appropriations that went forward were very good bills. They had very good policy. The spending was a little higher than I wanted, but for the most part, I approved of those appropriations bills. So what the House actually did was good, I thought, and we did it through regular order, and that was the way it is supposed to happen. The problem came when it went to the Senate, and the negotiations between the House and the Senate occurs at the very highest level. They call it the Four Corners level, and that would be the Senate leadership of majority and minority, and then the House Speaker and the minority leader in the House. So those four and their staff are the ones that do the actual final negotiation, and we capitulated, Martha. I mean, it's one thing to compromise. It's another thing to capitulate or to surrender. And in my opinion, we did not use the leverage that we had to accomplish what we should have done. And as a result, we got a bill, at least the last omnibus, where 112 Republicans voted against it and only 101 Republicans voted for it. That was not a Republican bill. That was a Democrat bill. And I rightfully voted against that bill. It was not good for America.
So is it fair to say that the deal that Kevin McCarthy cut several months ago was a better deal than what we ended up getting?
Well, if we would have actually allowed the leverage in that deal to go forward, right, then I think that we could have had a better deal, because there was a cut in that bill. There was a 1% cut. Instead of spending $60 billion more than Nancy Pelosi's 2023 levels, there was actually a 1% cut, but the cut wasn't even across the board. It wasn't even with defense and non-defense. It was like a 10% cut on non-defense, and a 1% cut on defense. So it would have done a whole lot more to defund the weaponized non-defense side of our government, like the DOJ, like the EPA, these agencies, the FBI, the ATF, these agencies that the current administration is using against the American people would have received a significant funding cut, and that's the only thing they listen to here in Washington.
No, I think you're absolutely right about that. And me, I'm kind of like one of these people where I like the Rand Paul plan, where he was saying, let's go back to 2019 funding, which was actually $1 trillion more than we took in that particular year. But it is under budget for what we're taking in now. Then you might have to build up some things like defense, border security, that kind of thing. But basically, if you went down to the 2019 budget, which is BC, before COVID, and then you maybe built it up for inflation, if you built it up for inflation, you'd be right around where revenues are right now. And we could have if we didn't have a balanced budget, we would be within a few $1 billion of having a balanced budget. And that makes sense to me. But you've got these people. I don't think people understand, Andrew, that we are spending every single dollar that we appropriated for COVID every single year, even though it's been 3 years since we've needed that money.
You're absolutely correct, Martha. If you look back for the last 365 days, we have now spent $3.1 trillion more. We have put ourselves, that means we have put ourselves in debt, $3.1 trillion in the last 365 days. That's $1 trillion of debt added every just a little over 100 days. That is absolutely unsustainable. This path, toward the fiscal cliff, we are increasing our speed. We are not slowing it down. We're not stopping it. We should be going to the balanced budget, just like what the state of Georgia has, just like what we personally have to deal with. We can't continue to print and spend more money that we don't have.
No, we can't do it. So you feel mildly optimistic that we're going in the right direction there, I think. What are the other issues on your mind today? Because I know there's lots of big things happening up there this week and next week.
Well, what we have to look forward to this coming month, all right, is...
right. Yes, I'm sorry.
Right. That's right. We're going to be working on Israel aid. We're going to be working on the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, the fixing of that bill, if you will, or of that law, because the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, as it is currently being abused, allows the FBI and the weaponized government to spy on American citizens. And that means that they can take your data, they can look at you without a warrant. And that is absolutely unacceptable. So it has to be reformed, and we are working on that reform. It almost came about a month ago before the funding fight, but it has to be, I think in April, the authorization for it runs out. So that means that we have to deal with it. Personally, I wouldn't mind if it just ran out. I mean, that way we could truly see, how much is it needed, how much is it not needed. But if we're going to keep it, it has to be reformed in two ways. Number one, for the government to be able to spy on you, they have to get an actual warrant from a judge, just like the Fourth Amendment says. And then number two, they can't be allowed to go out and buy data from these from whatever company will sell it. And every internet company out there sucks up data and categorizes your data and keeps your data, but they can't go buy that data in lieu of getting a warrant. So they can't spy on you by buying data from a data broker. So those are the two ways FISA has to be reformed. That's number one. And then we're going to end up dealing with Israel aid and Ukraine aid. And there's no way in the world that we should ever be funding anything for Ukraine, nothing, until our borders are 100% closed and fully secure. And we have metrics showing that.
Well, I'm looking forward to watching that unfold, only because that's exactly right. Why should we be spending money to help other people secure their borders and we are not securing our border? And, I point out all the time that President Obama and President Trump use the exact laws and executive orders that we have access to right now in order to do a much better job than Joe Biden's done. I mean, even Barack Obama was better than what Joe Biden has done, infinitely better than what Joe Biden has done. And so we have got to get back to that. Sure, there needs to be changes made. Andrew, I don't think you would disagree with that. But you cannot do immigration reform until you have a secure border.
And that is absolutely correct. Our border has to be the number one priority. And I want everyone to understand this. President Biden right now has the full executive authority to close the border. He can remain in Mexico. I mean, there are so many things that he can do to seal the border by executive order. He has the same authority that President Trump had, and President Trump did an incredible job of securing our southern border. Biden could do exactly the same thing, but that's not what he wants to do, and that's not what he has been doing for the last 3 years, and allowing 10 million illegal aliens to cross our borders and to cause all of the crime that we have seen from illegal aliens, not just to mention Lake and Riley that happened in the Athens community right here in our state of Georgia, but you have crimes that have happened in states across our nation, and we are seeing them pop up simply because of the illegal aliens influx, the invasion that's occurring at our southern border.
Absolutely, no doubt about it. So now you guys are off this coming week, is that correct? And then you'll be back the following week, or do you have a couple of weeks off?
No. We will be we'll be in the district this coming week, and I will be in the district, going around the district this particular week, and then we go back into session the week after that.
Absolutely. Well, Andrew Clyde, thank you so much for being with us today and always keeping us informed.
Thank you, Martha. Great to be with you.
It's local radio, and that's why you're listening. It's the Martha Zoller Show on AM 550 and FM 102.9 WDUN.
It is the Martha Zoller Show, and even in our community, we are dealing with the issues of anti-Semitism, and we have to keep fighting against it. Joining me right now is Ari Harow. He is an American-born Israeli who served as an advisor to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. I heard him a couple of weeks ago on the Ruthless podcast, and I knew I had to get him on. Ari, welcome to the program. How are you?
I'm doing well under the circumstances, Martha, and thanks for having me. I appreciate being here.
Yes, and your new book is called My Brother's Keeper, Netanyahu, Obama, and the Year of Terror and Conflict That Changed the Middle East Forever. The book is about 2014, but there's a lot of parallels to today. Expand on that a little bit.
Well, first and foremost, the ruthless massacre that we felt here in Israel and the whole world witnessed was perpetrated by a terrorist organization, one of the worst, if not the worst, terror organizations in the world, Hamas. And while they are recognized as such by the United States, by most of European countries as well, we face them on a regular basis. In 2014, Hamas kidnapped 3 teenage boys, ended up murdering them, and ultimately led to thousands of rockets being fired from the Gaza Strip into civilian populations in Israel. And Israel retaliated with a military operation that took us to Gaza. So militarily, we face the same foe as we face today. Their ruthlessness is the same as it was in 2014. And unfortunately, we now face similar diplomatic challenges to the ones that we had under the Obama administration as far as U.S. support and the contentiousness of the relationship between the White House and the Prime Minister's office in Israel.
Well, and it's this word salad that the people that are trying to be diplomatic engage in. I mean, I thought Anthony Blinken initially, when he came to Israel right after the attack, and he talked about the experiences of his family members in the Holocaust and in other areas in Russia with the pogroms that happened there, I thought that was exactly right. It was touching. It showed some humanity, and it showed our solidarity, and I thought he did well. But since then, it's like they're trying to please everybody. And this is not, in my view, an issue of left and right. This is an issue of right and wrong. Okay, there is you can equivocate in certain issues around the world where you can see both sides and you can do all that kind of thing. This is not one of those issues. This was an unprovoked attack on civilians. And the hostages are, in large part, civilians. I think there might be 1 or 2 IDF soldiers that are in this group. But we are trusting Hamas in I don't mean me, but in general, the world is trusting Hamas on these numbers they put out every day of how many, quote, civilians have been killed. But they can't even tell us exactly how many hostages are still alive. So I just don't have any trust of anything that comes out of Gaza. They could have been Singapore with the amount of money that they have had pouring into them for the last generation. But instead, they spent that money not on their own people, but on tunnels and arms. And as recently as last week, when aid was going into Gaza, Hamas took it over, and who knows what happened to it.
Right. No, you're most definitely correct, Martha. And this is not a challenge. This isn't about land. This isn't about Palestinian statehood. As you said, Israel withdrew completely from Gaza in 2005. And you said it before, this is good versus evil. This is right versus wrong. This is not about anything else. If Hamas had the opportunity, they would be conducting these same attacks against U.S. interests, against the U.S. itself. And we have to finally internalize, and when I say we, I'm talking about the West. We need to internalize that the threat and the issue that they have is not Israel. Israel is a mere excuse. They are out to defeat and destroy Western civilization, modernity, and everything that we all believe in, freedom and democracy, and it goes on and on. Israel, as I said, is nothing but an excuse. And something that I like to share with people is that if Israel disappeared tomorrow, which obviously would be a tragedy, these people are not going to stop doing what they're doing. It's not that all the problems in the Middle East and the problems of the world are going to disappear by forcing Israel and strong-handing Israel into capitulating to a terror organization. I actually argue the exact opposite. You saw the peace that began to sprout in the Middle East over the past 5-6 years with Israel reaching official diplomatic ties with the UAE, with Bahrain, with Morocco, with other countries. And that is a direct result of Israel standing up to these fundamentalists and showing that we are strong and we are a reliable and resilient partner. So anyone who really wants to see peace, anyone who wants to see a change for the good in this region, needs to support Israel's duty to finish the job in Gaza, to finish off Hamas, to make sure that the threat that we faced on October 7th which, as you said, was more horrific than anything the Jewish people have known since the Holocaust, is dealt with and finished. That is the proper road forward towards peace, towards a better world, and that is where the United States should be.
We're talking to Ari Harow. My Brother's Keeper is the book, Netanyahu, Obama, and the Year of Terror and Conflict that changed the Middle East forever. I've asked all my guests that I've had on since October 7th related to Israel, from the Southeastern Consul General to IDF soldiers to spokespeople, where they were on October 7th and what that day was like for them. So I'd like to ask that of you right now.
Of course. So, as I'm sure you're well aware, it was both a Saturday, which is our Sabbath, and it was the Jewish holiday of Simchat Torah. It's the day that we celebrate the Bible. And the rockets began to fall at roughly 6:30 in the morning. I live in the center of Israel, not far from the airport, so not in the immediate region in the south. But just due to the topography of the country, we're able to hear up close every explosion and every rocket that's shot from Gaza. And I was woken to those sounds. It was somewhat surprising because it's not something that we experience on a daily basis. And when it continued to rain minute after minute, after a half an hour, after an hour, we realized that something was different and something was wrong. I have a 20-year-old daughter who is serving in the military, and I woke her up and I said, I think we're at war. And within an hour, she was on her way back to her base, and we spent, I guess, the majority of the rest of the day in and out of bomb shelters. The massiveness of the tragedy of that day, the horror scenes and the stories that came out as that day progressed are just memories that we're all going to carry with us for the rest of our lives. And, something that we have become very accustomed to here in Israel is the ability to pair our tragedy and our loss with pride and with a view to the future and working towards a better future. Israel every year, annually, celebrates Memorial Day back to back with our National Independence Day for that very reason. In this country, the feeling of loss, the tragedy around these types of incidents goes in hand to hand with the great successes and the great vision and development that we see in this country. And I think that October 7th, more than any time before in our history, will be an example of that.
Well, I mean, it certainly will be, and it's something that I've seen the Supernova documentary about the music festival. I've been invited on 3 different occasions to watch the video that was put together from by the Israeli government to show from the GoPros and the Hamas side of what they did. And I just haven't accepted one of those invitations because I believe what happened, and I don't want to see those images because you can't unsee them. And it's just a decision that I made that I believe what happened. And so I don't want to see the celebrating. I've read the transcript, though, and I've read what happened, and it's horrific. And, Saudi Arabia 3 weeks before October 7th had an interview with Brett Baer where they said they were very close to an agreement with Israel. And I believe we can get back on track again with peace. I'm a Bible-believing faith person, and I believe that ultimately we will have peace. But we're going to have a lot of problems between now and then. Yeah,
I couldn't agree more. I think that this is a people and a land that yearns for peace. Israel is a country that wants nothing more than peace in the region and wants to be accepted. We spent 2,000 years wandering the world from country to country without a home of our own and returning to our ancestral homeland, building a country that is really a model in many ways and is of great progress and of great capacity for everything that Americans and the West believe in. And I think that hand in hand with that, when you're standing up against evil, strength is the only answer. And peace will come as it has. From a point of strength. Saudi Arabia does not want to reach a peace agreement with a weak, losing country of Israel. Saudi Arabia does not want to see Islamic fundamentalism such as that's promoted and acted upon by Hamas, by Hezbollah, by Iran, spread in the region. And if we truly want to see Saudi Arabia brought into the Abraham Accords and under the umbrella of peace, then only a definitive and clear victory against Hamas and for Israel will bring us to that achievable goal.
We're talking to Ari Harow. My Brother's Keeper is the book, Netanyahu, Obama, and the Year of Terror and Conflict that changed the Middle East forever. Thank you so much for being with us today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you, Martha.
To hear the full versions of last week's Martha Zoller shows, go to the podcast page at accesswdun.com, and you can follow me on social media at Martha Zoller.